Hello and welcome again. It is another podcast from Rooted Learning. My name is Ep4. On today's episode, I have some wonderful friends with me. She is a charity worker and he is a teacher. Together they are husband and wife. These guys are full of wisdom, passion and interesting conversations. I'm lucky to call them my friends and very glad to be having this opportunity to be discussing lots of interesting topics ranging from politics to patriarchy and stereotypes to something called Karen that apparently I ought to have known about already. Welcome Bianca and Mike. And
Hello.
there's a reason why I introduced Bianca first. Mike, what do you think?
Well, she's a lady, so ladies first.
Yeah, and to be fair, also, I think we naturally just unconsciously say Mike and Bianca. We always kind of put the man first in our
Yeah,
language.
people say husband and wife, don't
Exactly,
they?
and
Yeah.
as feminist as you can be, we still do that unconsciously. So I made a point
Absolutely.
of making sure I
Fair
said
enough.
Bianca first. Anyway.
Yeah. It's interesting you've introduced yourself in quite a old-fashioned way, using the phrase "ladies first" as well.
Well, that's the saying, isn't it? Ladies
yeah.
first. And so I was deliberately sending it up in a very sly way.
You meant it in a matriarchal way.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we're going to be talking about lots of
absolutely.
very interesting topics today. I'm looking forward to it. So guys, I'm really happy to have you here, and I've done a little setup on the floor, as you can tell. We've got some topics ahead of us, and you're free to pick at random. You can take it in turns, pick one, and then I've got some questions on the reverse side of each one. So when you feel free, when you feel ready. I don't know if one of you want to actually read them all out. So
Well, I think ladies first, so Bianca, take it away.
Okay, this is such an interesting little
It's a good
buffet
mix, yeah.
thing. So we have tackling racism in our community, lifelong learning, Age UK, so that's my employer, how the patriarchy hurts men, women in politics and politics in general, for a while, belief systems, faith and religion, internalised stereotypes, and then Karen. That's going to be great fun.
yeah. So which one are we going for first?
Well, there are only a couple that I feel I could actually contribute anything meaningful to here, so I will leave you to choose firstly. What would you go for?
I think lifelong learning is a nice
it's a good
jumping
start.
off point, actually.
Yeah, it's a good
That's
one.
something we're both.
And it's quite simple as well. And it'd be kind of like we can move on from it quite quickly. So the first question I've got for you on this one is, why is it so important for people to invest in their learning? Lifelong learning.
Lifelong learning. Well, learning is something that we do, isn't it? It's one of the defining characteristics of a human being is that we learn. We learn throughout our lives. And so if that's something that we're not doing, then I feel that we're cheating ourselves. But it's also quite an easy thing not to do, in that life demands so much of us in terms of work and career and just getting by, just getting on with meeting the daily grind. So we can often leave ourselves short of time for our lifelong learning, but it is something that is quite intrinsic to the human condition.
Nice
Yeah.
answer.
I think you're absolutely right. The same points I was going to raise, that I think there is a conversation to be had about how people should invest in learning and growing and evolving as a person. Particularly, I know, Akra, you've spoken in your podcast quite a bit to white people about, this process that a lot of white people are going through, particularly this year, following the huge sort of resurgence of the Black Lives Matter movement around doing the work, really investing in that learning to unpick, and we can talk about the internalised stereotypes later, but unpick this unconscious bias we have and this kind of racism that is inherent in all white people who have grown up within that system. And that is about learning. That is, not just about posting Black Square. That is about actually taking the time to read books and listen to people and go through that kind of process of educating yourself. And that is absolutely a responsibility for white people. But, I also agree with what Mike's saying about it's difficult to put that individual responsibility for people to invest in their learning beyond the full-time education system, when we live in a society that demands so much from people in terms of, you know, working hours. I mean, you know, even a 40-hour working week, huge, you know, numbers of people are doing a lot more than that, significantly more, and not necessarily being paid an amount that justifies those amount of hours. And there's very little left over. You know, people often say like, oh, you know, well, actually you have 8 hours left over once you take out sleep and work. But actually those things get filled by, you know, the demands we have, commuting, all the other demands that kind of the capitalist monster tries to take from us. So I think it is largely the responsibility of government to invest in lifelong learning and make that available and accessible.
Yeah, and just discussing things that you've just mentioned just strike me, because it's not just the time scale that we're limited to at the end of the day, it's also a bandwidth. So if you're constantly in a state of, you know, a fight or flight, survival, poverty, your bandwidth has already been taken up. So what is kind of left? What resources have you got left to then invest in your lifelong learning? So you're right, it's tricky. We can't just make that assumption or that kind of expectation, have that expectation of others. And actually, Bianca, both of you, you've just mentioned 2 things on my list of questions here without me having to ask you. And the first one was, what came out of COVID-19 and Black Lives Matter for you as main learning points? You've already started touching upon Black Lives Matter in this question already, so I don't know.
That's a difficult question in that I don't feel it. It's not that it hasn't impacted me in any way. It's obviously, being a white person, it hasn't impacted me very directly in terms of my race. However, I don't really know how to answer that. It has impacted me in that I work in a school which is almost entirely Somali school, and a lot of the children there, you know, they haven't heard of this. They haven't heard of Black Lives Matter. They are completely ignorant of the movement. The children that I've noticed that are aware of it tend to be from the Jamaican community, which is also quite interesting. And they walk around the school sort of saying Black Lives Matter and putting their fist in the air as they say it. So I'm still trying to gauge how I can get on board with it in a meaningful way. I don't just, like you say, I don't just want to post black squares and
make it tokenistic.
I really don't want to do that, because I feel that it is about time, isn't it? Really, the Black Lives Matter movement. So I'm sort of gauging how I'm going to really react with it, and so that I can actually bring something meaningful. Because the reason I'm being so cautious about it is because I feel that I'm in a particular situation in that I work with the children that I work with. So any kind of response I have to the Black Lives Matter movement, I feel is potentially quite meaningful. So I need to make sure that I make the best of the situation that I have.
Excellent. Yeah.
I think it's just increased. I shouldn't have used the word just there. But I think a huge thing that white people have been processing is how everyday those experiences of racism are for so many people of colour in the UK, and how important it is to listen to people and believe them. Mike, you were talking about a child at school had an experience of being turned away from a restaurant and being told we're fully booked.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I was almost entirely convinced that a lot of the children at my school hadn't encountered racism, simply because they live in quite a tight-knit community and they don't tend to go much beyond the boundaries of their own community. And this shows the ignorance I have. I was fairly sure that they hadn't encountered racism. And then one of the girls mentioned the word Karen, and I said, how come you know that word? And she didn't really explain how she knew the word, but I'm guessing it was through social media or something like that. And she actually didn't really understand what the word meant. She thought it just meant, a horrible woman. And I managed to sort of draw out of her that this woman, this horrible woman that she was referring to, was horrible on the basis of her behaving in a racist way. And then it grew into this conversation about how each of these children have been refused entry into restaurants. Them and their families have been refused entry into restaurants, whilst white families were ushered in.
I'm very
Right in front of them.
surprised to hear that happens here.
I know.
A very liberal left kind of city, I would say. I would describe Bristol as.
Yeah, so that was an eye-opening moment for me.
Yeah, that phrase Karen, or acronym Karen, I mean, when you mentioned it last week and I said, hold off, let's keep it for the podcast, you can fill me in on it. You might have noticed I've written it in kind of a spooky kind of way on that piece of paper, and the reason why is it sounds like the name of a really good horror movie to me.
like Carrie, yeah.
Yeah.
It does, doesn't it? The other question I've got for you guys is, what are you reading at the moment?
I have 2 books on my bedside table sat there making me feel guilty because I've not been reading them.
Why should you feel
and
guilty?
So, well, it's actually that I want to read, and I want to kind of have that bandwidth to be able to read a bit more. But I'm partway through, I'm about halfway through both of them. So one is Natives by Akala.
Yeah.
Akala, have you read that?
I've got it on my bookshelf
Yeah,
downstairs. I've listened to loads of his little chats and interviews and stuff on YouTube. He's amazing.
Yeah.
How are you
And he
finding
has
the
a
book?
great writing style, so it's not, I would say it's challenging in terms of the content, but it's not, difficult to read in terms of the language. It's quite kind of accessible and it's a really enjoyable read. And also Girl, Woman, Other by Bernardine Evaristo,
Ooh,
which is a really interesting novel. 12 different characters, and they're little sort of vignettes of these characters' lives that intersect, and they are all Black British women or young women. So it's very much a composite picture of the Black British experience,
Yeah.
and that's great.
And
Very
that's-
different, but really enjoyable, and I would really recommend it because it's actually quite easy to kind of dip in and out of because they're very short little snapshots.
Oh, so it's called, what's it
Girl,
called?
Woman, Other.
Oh, I'm going to make a note of that. Sounds
It's-
really good.
It is written in a slightly unusual way. There's no punctuation, which is a bit strange, and the sort of layout on the page is quite poetic. But that doesn't mean, again, it's really accessible, really easy to read.
And how about you, Mike?
I have to admit, I'm not reading anything at the moment.
I thought you were reading an autobiography.
Oh yes, I am, but it's going very slowly. I'm not sure I can say I'm actually reading it. I've dipped in and out of it, but yes, I'm slowly reading the autobiography of an English Lama, so Lama meaning Buddhist teacher, called Nachang Rinpoche. I can't really tell you an awful lot about the book as yet because I'm only a couple of chapters in. But it's just talked about his early childhood experiences and his adolescent experiences growing up.
Yeah, sound like good books either way. And the nice thing about reading, you learn from each other and people's stories and imaginations, and you just get an insight into other people's minds, even if it's fictional. It's still learning, isn't it? It's so important. I was going to briefly ask you, and then we'll move on to another one of those pieces of paper on the floor. So people during lockdown have really embarked on creative endeavours if they have had the opportunity and inspiration to. Of course, like we said, some people they've just been struggling and trying to cope really during this time. But for me, I started this rooted learning little project, and it really came off the back of the Black Lives Matter issue and the racist incident that my daughter experienced. So I'm one of the lucky ones who was able to channel some of that time into something creative, and I just wondered if you guys have managed to do anything during your COVID time.
Oh yeah, I had a really good time actually in lockdown. I know that might be a bit of a controversial thing to say, but I've had a great time in terms of my creative outlets. I like to do a bit of painting, so I did a lot of that and actually sold a few pieces, including to yourself.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm very fortunate in that I have the space and the resources to be able to embark upon that.
Mike, if you have a quick plug then, I don't know if there's a place where people can find your art. I don't know if you've got an Instagram page where people can just look you up and...
I do, yeah. So my Instagram is Rangjung Powell. It's not just my artwork, it's a general Instagram account, but I do post all of my artwork up on there. So if anybody wants to go to Rangjung Powell on Instagram, have a look.
Is that Rang, R-A-N-G, Jung, J-U,
Yeah,
and then
P-A-W, so P-A-W-O, Ranging Power.
perfect, cool. And how about you, Bianca?
I mean, we also did the two very cliched things of gardening and bread making.
Oh, nice.
Oh yeah, we got
So
into making
we,
bagels, didn't we? We
we
learned
did.
to make
Wow.
bagels. Yeah, that was
Did
good.
you,
Yeah, we didn't quite go the whole hog and get into sourdough.
I was just about to ask you about the sourdough
No,
process, if you
No,
did.
we had to check ourselves a little bit there,
Yeah.
didn't we?
But the bagels,
Bagels
big
were a winner.
success.
Yeah, really good.
And vegan, of course.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you guys are incredible vegan cooks, aren't you? Because you make your own bacon from time to time.
Bianca's the incredible vegan cook. I'm an incredible vegan eater. Bianca is a genius in the kitchen.
Yeah.
We got into making ice cream as well.
Oh, yes,
Wow.
that's
Ice
right.
cream maker. That was a fun.
So that's what we've got.
purchase.
There's well, not so much yourself, but there's a friend of ours who we're sort of thinking of going into business together, making vegan ice cream.
That's a cool idea.
Yeah, it's at its well, it sort of hasn't gone very far yet, has it? We had the initial idea, made a load of ice cream, came up with the name, we scrapped the name, and now our friend who was living with us over lockdown has moved out, so things have sort of paused for the time being. But that's the plan to.
I look forward to the
Yeah.
little ice cream cart.
Absolutely. Well, we'll give some free samples actually. That would probably be a good
Yeah,
idea.
that would be
Then
really
you can
cool.
Talk about how great our ice cream is.
Definitely. So we can move on now.
Yes,
So I
good
don't know
idea.
who wants to pick next. Spoiled for choice, it seems like.
So you pick this time.
I'm going to pick this one.
Ah.
With some trepidation. So, patriarchy hurts men.
Yeah, I'll read the back.
Do.
First question, why?
Well, before I actually answer that question, I will just open with, I think it does, but that's not in the sense of men's rights or men are the real victims. That's not at all what I'm going to allude to or anything like that. So before anybody listens to this and starts to get upset that I'm going to go down that route, that's really not the route I'm going down. Patriarchy hurts men in the sense that it just hurts everybody.
Yeah.
Obviously, women are certainly the first victims when it comes to the patriarchal systems, but it also does hurt men too, in that it establishes a certain way of being that you have to live up to as a man. There's a certain kind of archetype you have to fulfill as a man, and it just distorts any kind of natural being a man might display.
Yeah. Can I just intercept here, because I'm just thinking back to a bit of training that we had just maybe a week or two ago, and obviously we work with very vulnerable young people and stuff, and we were looking at emotion and the language that obviously we have a bit more language that we can use to when we're just describing our emotions, especially when we're going through something quite tricky. But when you look at boys and girls have more emotional language that they can access when they're feeling a particular way. They can explain it. They can, and that really helps in terms of overcoming tricky situations. Boys don't have as much language. However, there has been some research, I need to look into this a little more, that shows that boys, when they're trying to describe their own emotion, they have very limited language. Yet when they're trying to describe a female's emotion, they do have that language there.
So
But they just want to apply it to themselves.
Sure. Well,
So
this is the kind of thing that I'm trying to get at here, in that it just paints a picture of how men and boys think they should be, and it's not necessarily very helpful. So the archetype of the big, strong, tough man that doesn't suffer from any negative emotions and just gets on with life being hard and being that kind of thing.
Yeah. Bianca, I think I've got one listed here for you. Can men be feminists too?
Oh, okay, that's a question for me.
Well, either one of you, but I thought you might be more kind of. Yeah.
I mean, absolutely. Feminism is a belief in equality for all genders. I think that there are a lot of false perceptions of feminism, and some of that stems from kind of very prominent movements that perhaps were historically, understandably, very anti-men. And there were movements in the 60s that were about saying, well, we could live in a world without men. If you think about the radical feminist movement, particularly for gay women who identified as lesbian, having a very strong movement about actually, you know, we can issue men, women can rule the world. But fundamentally, feminism is about, you know, specifically talking about first and third wave feminism is about equality for all genders, and that is absolutely, we need men on board with that. We need men to fight for us too, just as white people need to be the most invested in fighting for racial equality. I think that's hugely important, and I completely agree with the fact that patriarchy is not good for anyone. Anything, you know, these kinds of hierarchies that put a huge amount of responsibility onto one group and then marginalise and belittle another group, and gender constraints as well. Patriarchy can only operate if people are really quite constrained within gender roles, which very, very few, if any, people truly fit within. You know what Mike was saying about it. It stops you from being able to, were you saying, fully express yourself or be...
Well, I think you've hit the nail on the head entirely with what you've just said. If you've got these very limited constraints in which your society expects you to operate, whereas actually you're vaster than that, but if you're shrinking yourself down to fit into some kind of box, that's difficult. I mean, it's impossible to do. But if that's what men and boys are trying to do, then we're going to lose so much scope of what it is to be an individual. And I feel like I probably shouldn't say any more, because actually I think you answered that question really well.
You did answer it beautifully.
That was a really good answer.
But both of you did. And Mike, again, it goes back to, I've put here, toxic masculinity on here as well. I don't know if you want to touch on that.
So I've certainly experienced that to some extent in my life, particularly when I was younger. I don't know, luckily I feel like I survived it quite well. I mentioned this to you before, didn't I, Carl? When I was younger, I used to really like the Alien films, and I thought Ripley was an amazing character. She was absolutely brilliant, and in particular in the third Alien film, when she has the shaved head, because I had a shaved head as well. I really identified with her, just how tough she was. And there's a scene where she's got this sort of khaki baggy t-shirt on, and my mum came home one day and gave me saw this t-shirt in the charity shop and gave it to me, and I was over the moon and called it my Ripley t-shirt. My dad was horrified that I was sort of in any way inspired or comparing myself to a woman, and he really wasn't impressed. And I don't know why, because I wasn't a particularly confident or stalwart young person, and yet I just felt like, so what? So I feel like, I don't know why, I don't know how, but I managed to kind of survive it quite well. But if I didn't have the stones that I had at the time, I might have let that really burrow deep and affect me some way. But yes, I certainly had that in my background, certainly had that in my childhood. There was this expectation that boys did this, boys did that, boys don't cry, boys do sport and do tough things and just get on with it. And you know, and I probably shouldn't talk too ill of my dad, because I do actually get on with him very well.
No, but we're all humans, and you know, trying to figure ourselves out, and the adults around us are just like us, making mistakes, and we're making mistakes and learning along the way, and learning quickly or learning slowly, either way learning, aren't we? And it moves us on again to mental health, because Maya's recently put up on, I don't know if anyone's seen it on Instagram, she's just put up about black men in particular and mental health and their struggle, and there's been it's been in the news recently as well. So it's interesting how mental health, especially with men, you know, we do know suicide rates are quite high amongst men, young men as well. And then there's that extra layer, if you are a person of colour, how you are then perceived, mental health is perceived differently. So, you know, there's lots of learning to be done there around that topic as well, and it all fits under the patriarchy, doesn't it? And how it hurts men. Again, it just spreads out, and there's just so much complexity within even that subject, isn't there?
Yeah. And I think that's why, I mean, I don't want this to be misconstrued, but I'm about to say, I don't think it's important to validate the arguments of things such as the men's rights movement, feminism, whatever
I
strange
actually have never
medical
heard of
world.
melanin.
Melanism.
No,
I've
this
not
is
heard
a
of that
thing,
either.
yeah.
Melanism.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't recommend googling it particularly, but you know, and I think these movements, they're quite subcultural. They're quite small in themselves in terms of men who fully ascribe to them, but they have an impact, particularly on social media, and they kind of permeate a lot of ideologies. But I think it's important not to just throw that out, because there are very valid issues stemming from toxic masculinity that are, to a certain extent, the jumping off point for some of this quite right-wing ideology. One of those is, as you said, the mental health aspect of things. Suicide is the biggest killer of men under the age of 45.
Well, there you are. There's a statistic
and
that's
that's
quite
a
shocking.
really important thing that we need to address, what the impact of that is, and and how, like you're talking about, how it affects the individual, but also the systemic effects of patriarchy and toxic masculinity in, meaning that men are less likely to reach out for and be able to access mental health support. And that's a systemic thing also in how services are promoted and how services need to do more outreach and be more accessible to men. Lack of, like you're an example of someone who has really not let patriarchy constrain you in going into primary teaching. Massive underrepresentation of men in primary school teaching, which is a big thing for young boys. Lack of male role models in the teaching environment.
And girls.
So it all becomes very difficult.
Yeah.
Sure.
Girls need it too.
Yeah,
so.
they do. Yeah, absolutely.
Plus, I think the other aspect is that you did decide to kind of carve your own path in life as well, despite kind of pressure, that patriarchal pressure in a way. You have chosen to carve a very interesting path for yourself in life, which hopefully we do come around to discussing. I'm very mindful we've already hit half an hour, so it might end up being that we split this up into part 2, and at some point we might just park some of these and save them for a second episode with the Bianca and Mike team still keeping the lady first. Shall we move on to another one?
Yes,
then?
I think so. We could talk more on that, I'd say.
Yeah.
But yes, let's go for it. Right, your turn, Bianca. What are we going to go for now?
So, you think Mike's
Yeah.
pointing to one.
I'm thinking
Mike
it's such a
wants
big
to
one.
Mike wants to talk about women in politics and politics in general.
Actually, I don't particularly want to talk about women in politics, but I would like to hear what you have to say, because I feel like you're on a roll, Bianca. You're saying some fantastic things.
And I have to point out that you guys came for dinner last week, and Mike just mentioned to me that he had a friend round the night before, maybe the week before or something, and to visit him, his friend, but Bianca spoke to him for 2 whole hours about politics.
5 hours.
5 hours.
I spoke to him for 15 minutes, and that was all I got to say. And then
So this is definitely going to take up the second half of that hour. So
I'm being very restrained today.
So this is my revenge.
But no, this is the place you do not be restrained, because this is like the core aspect of all of these. These are great topics to carry on discussing. We definitely have to end on Karen.
Yeah.
And we can definitely save those for a different podcast, because it's just so interesting. And Bianca, I'm going to start with you. So I know I wanted to talk to you about Age UK, but we can save that for the next one if we end up breaking it into 2, because that's such a big topic as well. But you're running for Labour candidacy. Where and how did that come about?
So I have been. It's just been a few weeks now, actually, since I was selected as one of the Labour candidates for my local area in Bristol. That's Bishopsworth. So I'm running to be a councillor in the May 2021 elections, and that's very busy already, actually. We've had some volunteers out leafleting for us today, which is brilliant, and I've been doing quite a lot this week as well. Because of COVID restrictions, and also because this is a ward where we need a really big swing. We need a really big vote change from the Fems really of the last 30 years now, or to take it from the Conservatives. We need to do a really long campaign, so it's quite busy. And I was sort of involved with the campaign before I was selected as one of the candidates as well. I'm quite involved. Well, I've been quite involved in my local Labour Party only really since February this year, so that's an interesting thing. One of the things during lockdown for me was getting a lot more involved in politics. I had, just before COVID, I had decided to become more involved in the Labour Party. I've been campaigning for them at the general election last year. Quite traumatic, 13th of December last year, but once then we kind of, a lot of us activists picked ourselves up, dusted ourselves off in the new year, and I think there's a lot of new blood came into the grassroots of the Labour Party. I think a lot of us just felt this can't happen again, we need to be more involved. And actually, these short campaign times, particularly with having the snap general election last year, aren't enough time to communicate that message to voters. Labour need to be a part of people's everyday life. We need communities and members of the electorate to understand us better. So that's why I decided to go for the role of policy officer within my local CLP, Constituency Labour Party. So that's the grassroots group of volunteers running Bristol South Labour Party. And I also did some canvassing for our one of our local candidates back in February. I think it was February or March, really, before the world changed. And then after that, he invited me to help him set up a local mutual aid group just through Facebook. So that was something that kept me very busy, particularly at the start of lockdown, just trying to connect people to be able to help each other with things like shopping, collecting prescriptions, just getting information out there, that kind of immediate community response, which is incredible. So a lot of, my, say, political work, yes, it's with Labour activists, Labour comrades, but it's a lot of it is, just connecting with the community, connecting with people with all on no political affiliations. And we, I've set up a local book group. We have been doing litter picks, which is great. People really care about litter. That's something we've learned. And so a lot of what's nice is, yes, we're doing lots of campaigning, and who knows what will happen in May, but I don't want it to feel like a lost cause. If we've actually, we've met new people, we've done a lot of litter picking, we're hopefully making a difference to the community through this campaign over the next few months anyway.
Yeah.
Whatever happens.
You're so inspiring, Mike. I can just see you just with the same expression that I can feel on my own face of inspiration, because you're young and you've got so many different things going on in your life. Your job in itself, your full-time job in itself is giving to the community, just like yours is, Mike. And I just think, sometimes we can think, oh, we're doing our bit, aren't we, through our work, and then it's our switch off time, and you're just constantly on the go, and how can I make a difference? How can I make a difference? And where most people would be thinking, let's just crack open a bottle of wine and chill and watch some Netflix and I'm glad you're still making time for that, but then you're out litter picking. I mean, it's so nice to hear that, the care, the love, and the community work, and it's so important to just look after our communities, and we forget that, especially in the Western world, we forget to look after our communities, and that's what keeps us thriving and surviving, and keeps us away from being lonely, which you do a lot of work around as well. That's impressive. So my next question for you, what challenges do you feel, being a woman in politics, do you feel like you have, or women in general in politics have?
Personally, I would say I am within a political environment. I'm yet to have felt marginalised or at a disadvantage because of my gender. I haven't. If anything, there's probably been some positive action that has helped me. I mean, the role of policy officer, only women can put themselves up for it because of gender balance within our constituency Labour Party. So I mean, with the councillor selection, actually, a man could have gone for it. My running mate is male, and there, because it is not seen at the moment as a winnable seat by the Labour Party at large. They were, we think it's winnable, we do. That there weren't necessarily those rules. So for me, I have found the Labour Party an incredibly supportive place. And again, I work in the charity sector, quite a female-dominated. Certainly the charity I work for, largely female workforce. So I've kind of felt quite comfortable in that. I'm not sure how much politics is going to end up becoming a career for me, rather than perhaps more of a kind of voluntary grassroots activist side of things. Who knows? We'll see where that goes. But I am aware there is still, once you actually get into electoral politics, there's still massive issues facing women. I don't know if you had a question about that.
I've got that next. Remember, I mentioned it to you, but I don't know if you wanted to mention electoral.
Well, I was just thinking, just even in terms of on social media, the amounts of abuse and threats of violence that female politicians face. It's really quite terrifying.
That does feed into the next bit then, doesn't it? I got slightly distracted then because two reasons. Mike started giggling at me, maybe, but it's nice. It's like nice little moments, isn't it? And also your socks, Mike. Why did I get distracted by your socks?
They're great, aren't they?
They're really good socks.
My mum made them.
Really?
Yeah.
They're really cool. They're nice little Christmas presents, aren't they?
Yeah. Oh, if she hears you say that, you'll end up with loads of them.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
They're nice Christmas presents, aren't they? Hopefully she hears that. So the next question I have, it's not a question, I'm going to throw out some names to you. Can you just summarise, either one of you, I don't care, your opinions on each? And I've put here measured, of course, exclamation mark. So my first name is Diane Abbott.
Oh, you're going to me first. I'm a huge admirer of Diane Abbott. I think she's paved the way for a huge number of black women in politics. She has been a tireless, devoted, lifelong activist within the Labour Party. I really don't have anything negative to say about Diane Abbott. I think that she's, a fantastic voice for socialism and really unapologetically socialist. And I am utterly appalled at the way that a lot of even the mainstream media, let alone the Twitter trolls, have treated her, and her resilience is really quite astonishing as well. I don't know if you have.
I don't have much to add. Anything I know about her, I've learned from you, really.
So my next person, I didn't really know of her until recently, and I'm just going to throw it out. It's Jacinda Ardern.
No, I know nothing about this person.
I don't know a huge amount about her. I would really like to learn more about her. I think, she seems to have a lot of support throughout the world. She's certainly been presented in a very positive light, and the way she has handled COVID-19 in terms of the data is astonishing. Compared to so many other countries, particularly compared to other neoliberal capitalist countries, is really quite astonishing. And I think she's also shown kind of a real empathy and a real compassion to people. When there was that terrorist attack was it in Wellington?
So we're talking about New Zealand, because she's the New Zealand Prime Minister.
Yes, sorry, in case anyone listening doesn't know, so she's the Prime Minister of New Zealand, and when there was that awful terrorist attack, her response was so markedly different to a lot of sort of Western leaders. It was so compassionate, and in terms of policy as well, bringing in new gun laws immediately, not kind of listening to the lobbies, not dilly-dallying on it, just bringing that in straight away, and also just giving that really incredibly kind of compassionate, empathetic response as well. I think she's demonstrated how politics can be done differently to a lot of her kind of peers and contemporaries, actually. And and I do think that there is something very significant about the fact that she is a younger woman as well.
And a mother, and she became a mother, I think, back in 2018.
Oh.
So she was already Prime Minister and then became a mother. How inspiring is that? And I love that word you just used as well, dilly-dallying. I love that word. It's even better with an Indian accent, but I'm not going to do it. And last, I was going to say last but not least. I'm not sure if that works. Priti Patel.
I don't have much to say about her. That's nice. So that I'm not going to say anything.
Measured, of course. Remember, keep it measured.
I think she's a really difficult person to be measured about, because she has said things that are so divisive and come from such a place of kind of real nasty stigmatizing and scapegoating politics. Her recent comments about this endless talk about illegal migrants and illegal asylum seekers, as if she doesn't understand how the asylum system works.
And didn't she say something about her parents don't deserve to be or shouldn't be here or something?
Yeah.
Is that correct?
I think that's the only way she could really respond to justifying her politics, really, is to say, rather than have double standards, say, well, I don't think my parents should be here either.
But I find that interesting, and that could almost lead on to one of our other topics, in that, internalised stereotypes, internalised racism, perhaps. That's a very strange thing to say.
It's really weird. I mean, I think I've spoken about it previously. I've just been shocked since 2016, when Brexit even happened and the arguments for, the immigration and everything. There were a lot of South Asians who were in support of Brexit because of immigration. It did send me into just complete, what, I don't know what's going on anymore. I was just so confused. We are children of immigrants. We are here for a reason. There's a purpose in immigration, and it's a global purpose, and it works, and it's just a lack of understanding and want to understand, and just kind of fear-based again, something that's coming from somewhere else towards us, and we should be afraid it's a threat to us again. It goes back to that.
But that's how it goes, isn't it? I mean, everybody is the descendant of an immigrant to some extent or another. There's immigration within my family. My mother's maiden name is Mizonovic, and my dad and I were talking about having a conversation about immigrants, and I hadn't quite clocked that we were coming at it from completely different angles. And I was basically talking about how we need to help immigrants. He was talking about how we need to stop them from coming into the country. And I thought, you married a woman whose name is Mizonovic. But this is how it goes, isn't it?
Yeah.
You do get people that forget that they are immigrants or descendants of immigrants.
Yeah, I think it's really, like you say, it's really important to be measured on this, because there is a very difficult dynamic in Mike and I as two white people talking about, a politician of colour, talking about non-white people, and suggesting that they, saying that they must be self-hating. That's a really difficult phrase that's been used by a lot of people to justify that, racism, to say that people must be self-hating if they are people of colour who hold certain views. I think that's difficult, but I think it's a reminder that anyone can forget their privilege. Anyone can be unaware of their own privilege, even if that, even if that privilege is, intersectional. Perhaps they are, immigrants, and they still face difficulties every day in this country. There's still, privilege that people have that they can just be unaware of.
That was actually what I was trying to say, but Bianca has
I was
said
just
it
going to say
far
again,
more.
she's hit the nail on the head. And if I think about Priti Patel from my perspective, I don't really care too much to know about her and her history and all of that kind of stuff. But if you just watch her character, her persona, and the way she presents herself, to me, there's a sense of entitlement behind it, and there's a power hungry kind of what would you call it, alpha female type of character there. So on an individual level, if we just focus on the human rather than all the other labels that we can attach to the human, I feel like when I listen to you talk about politics or action, your kind of political, your passion behind your kind of political ideas, there's no, obviously we're always gaining something from it for ourselves, but that's not your intention. That's not your direct conscious attention. Obviously we're always, there's always something for us to get from it as well, but you're giving, your intention is to give, and it's I would say selfless, but there's selfishness in her, to me, selfishness in her actions and her, and I don't fully buy into them belonging to her. That's my viewpoint.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always important to kind of see what you can find out about someone's origins in politics and what originally motivated them. I do think that's very kind of you to kind of paint it in that way. I mean, I wouldn't say that everything I do and all of my actions are entirely selfless, but I think you have to check in with what your motivation is for being involved in things. And you can see things from a selfish perspective of helping people out makes enriches my life as well. But I think there was something I really wanted to say about. I was thinking about the fact that you're right that alpha female people have to succeed in politics. People often almost inevitably have to kind of take that approach and kind of present themselves in that way. But also, I think this people forgetting their privilege. It's the result of we live in an increasingly that we have this idea from living under a conservative government and conservative politics that we live in a meritocracy. We have this idea that everyone is self-made, that people achieve things through their own means. We are very much blinded to kind of the systems that determine the ways that the opportunities that people have.
Yeah. So moving on, let's go back to your political kind of activity at the moment. So how are you going to reach out to those disengaged from politics or those who have been firm Tory voters? So
yeah, and we have a lot of them in. I don't mean that to sound dismissive, but we've had a large Conservative vote in our ward, and we certainly have a lot of people who have voted for the incumbent or one of the current Tory councillors for years. Whether they then vote, I think the way that people vote in local elections can often be quite different to how they vote in general elections. So, it's quite different in terms of campaigning, certainly, in terms of the local issues that people care about, litter, little things like that rather than the big national issues. So it's something we're having to look at. I think that, sorry, what was the question again? So it's how
are you going to kind of reach out to those disengaged from politics and also those Tory voters?
Sure. So I think for people who are disengaged, you need to make it clear what effective local democracy means. So I think we need to make it really clear what we will be fighting for in City Hall if we're able to go and make those decisions on behalf of the local community and be the voice of the local community. I think we need to make it really clear what councillors do for people, because a lot of people don't necessarily know, unless they have local councillors who are really active, who advertise the fact that they do regular drop-in surgeries where local residents can come and speak about their concerns and have them addressed. A lot of people don't know who their local councillor is, and don't necessarily know what they do for them, and that very much is the case in our area. current counsellors don't do drop-in surgery, so that's a big thing that we would say we would do. Might be, who knows how long our coronavirus measures are going to be in place, that we may have to do that in a COVID safe way or via telephone or video conferencing, we'll see. But the point is we're going to make ourselves approachable to anyone through any means, and so that people can just come to us at particular times each week, and advertise that really widely. Make it so that people don't have to be online or know how to go onto the council website to find out our contact details. That's a really big thing, and finding out what matters to people. So we're doing a community survey at the moment to find out what people's priorities are. Whether they are concerned about their children's education or about care for people in residential homes or people receiving adult social care, or whether they really care about road safety. Whether we know that there's not very good cycling infrastructure in our area, and perhaps there aren't enough pedestrian crossings for pedestrians as well, so finding out about that. We're also doing some work around accessibility of our green spaces. We've got a lovely nature reserve and some lovely green spaces in our area that have these very old barriers set up to stop supposedly motorbikes coming in, but they also stop people on adaptive bicycles, people in wheelchairs, people on mobility scooters from getting in as well. So we're looking at, can we get those removed? What kind of things can we do that will really make a difference to people's day-to-day lives? So we're largely trying to keep it really local. I think there are cultural issues we would like to talk about as well. According to the best data we have, which is the Bristol City Council's Quality of Life Survey, we have lower levels of community cohesion in our area. So we have, compared to the rest of Bristol, quite low levels of people who say that people from different backgrounds get along well together in the area. So we're interested in why that is, and showing that as politicians, this is what we believe in, this is what Labour values are about, community cohesion, and about, social justice and what that means. But also, I think we need more arts and culture activities in our area. We need more opportunities for people to come together. There wasn't a huge amount necessarily pre-COVID. There's been some really wonderful things in our community that have come out of lockdown. We've had we're halfway through doing ours window displays and people's windows, and people are sharing those on Facebook. So I think those kind of things, giving the community a chance to kind of, come together, providing that social connection for people, is a great thing for political movements to do as well.
Sounds, amazing. I'm just going to say there are questions on here that I'm going to skip because of the time. I really want to move on to Karen to finish it off. So I'm going to save them for the second part because politics is still going to feature heavily on that, but I do want to just ask you about the social media presence then, because I guess if you're actually with this, there would be a Facebook page, or is there already a Facebook page available?
There is, yes. Yeah. So for our local campaign.
Yeah, so where people can just like your page and then you've got followers kind of accumulating.
Fantastic. So you can find us on Facebook. I think it's Facebook / we are, if you search for Rossetti, so that's ROSSEWTI Pierce, PEARCE, that's my running mate Thomas Pierce, for Bishopsworth, number 4. You'll find us. Rossetti Pierce for Bishopsworth on Facebook. We're largely on Facebook at the moment. One of my to-dos, I need to set up an Instagram account, which is fun. I love Instagram. Mike was telling me yesterday we need to be on Twitter, which I'm trying to avoid Twitter for my mental health. But, we will probably be on Twitter at some point.
Do what I do, just get Mike to manage the Twitter account, so I get Mike to manage the...
No, I don't think you should be on Twitter, because it's a bad idea.
But definitely, at some point you can maybe make a note of them and I'll get them added on to the bottom of this podcast once it's published, just to make it easier for people so there are no excuses. It's easy, you just click on the link and then just like the page. It's really straightforward then, isn't it? You don't have to remember Rossetti.
Yeah.
for
That's
bishops.
great.
Well. But otherwise it is executive
Yeah.
dot penis for bishops. Well. Yeah. How does that sound?
It's like,
Yeah,
great,
so I did have a
thank
few
you.
more questions, but definitely there'll be really kind of interesting, deep questions that will probably take you about 20 minutes to half an hour to answer anyway, so we'll save them for next time.
Nice.
But to finish off then,
Karen.
and look, if I turn it over, if I just turn it over,
There's nothing. Oh my goodness.
just a
me.
question mark.
Right, so, well, again.
Start answering. I'm going to Google this and see what Wikipedia tells me as well.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't really know what to say. Well, again, anything interesting I know, I've learnt it from Bianca. Anything I've heard of, I've learnt it from her. So.
I just realised I'm not connected to Wi-Fi, so I can't look it up.
Oh,
So,
that's
so
really
I
sad.
mean, I'm trying to think when I first heard the term Karen. It probably was this year, no, maybe last year. I mean, essentially, Karen is archetype the word? She's sort of a
Probably not.
stereotype,
Stereotype,
really,
I would say.
of a white woman. I don't know, somewhere probably between the ages of 25 and
See, I wouldn't have known.
55.
I wouldn't have known.
It's a
this.
white woman with a sense of entitlement, essentially. I think the kind of image that lots of people throw out is Karen is asking to speak to the manager. And apparently there's a Karen haircut as well. I don't know if this is quite an
Interesting.
American thing. Karens tend to have kind of short. I only learned this the other day. Hair shorter at the back and longer at the front. I don't really understand that.
But what does a Karen
stereotype,
do
but,
then? What is it? If you're being a Karen, what are you actually doing then?
I think if you are being a Karen, you are demanding to be treated better or differently to other people, and you're exploiting your privilege, essentially. So there was. Did you hear the story from back in, was it April or May in Central Park?
No.
There was a really nasty incident caught on film where a woman, I'm pretty sure she was named Karen, but I don't think this is the origin.
Is this a guy who was jogging in a park and she filmed it? She called the police saying that she felt threatened by him or frightened by him.
He was bird watching in an area of Central Park where dogs aren't allowed because it's a protected wildlife area. And she was walking with her dog, I think, off the lead. Maybe the dog was allowed but on the lead. Either way, she was doing something against the rules with her dog. And he had asked her to put the dog back on the lead. And the bit caught on film, she's got incredibly aggressive about this. And she starts calling the police. And the really striking and terrifying part of it is that she says, I am going to tell the police that an African American man is threatening my life. And that is her saying, this is the power that I have. And this was before George Floyd. But as hopefully the world is now aware, that is a death threat towards a black man in America to say, I am going to call the police on you. And that is a power dynamic that a white woman would hold over a black man. So she kind of, I guess, became emblematic of the really problematic aspects of kind of the way that white women use their privilege. But I think also, the kind of Karen meme is this kind of woman who just, goes around kind of, with this sense of entitlement. I would speak to the employee, poor employee at the shop about I'm unhappy about something, and if they give a perfectly reasonable response, well, I want to speak to the manager. Karen wants to speak to the manager seems to be a line. I think it also encompasses things like, the idea of white tears, the idea that white women can often use their kind of fragility to get things by, they can just turn on the waterworks.
Oh, interesting.
As well, so I think that's also kind of part of what the idea of Karen.
I'm just currently in my head feeling sorry for every woman or guy named Karen, who is like really decent human being, and they've just been typecast in a way. And it's not a very nice one, is it? So yeah.
No, I mean I don't know whether it's helpful. I think it's quite amusing. I think if it's helpful for people to kind of express this, particular kind of, what's the word? Not kind of psychology.
Yeah.
That they've kind of experienced among people. That's a good thing. But
Yeah.
you've got to feel bad for people who are Christian.
I know, I feel a bit bad, but we're going to have to wrap it up. I'm really sad. We've made it over an hour. I was trying to contain it within an hour, and we have only touched half of the topic. So the ones that we haven't looked at, Age UK, which would have been dominated by Bianca. Tackling racism in our community, definitely one that Mike, you would have got your teeth stuck
Certainly
into.
touch on that. Yeah.
And internalised stereotypes, both of you would have got really kind of engrossed in that one. And then the last one, I definitely really wanted to learn a lot about your kind of belief system, Mike, especially because of your Buddhist practice, and your ideas, I think, around materialism being a predominant Western faith. So religion, would you call it religion? Materialism? Could you go as far as saying it's
I would say it's religion, perhaps in the wider sense of the word.
Yeah.
It's not a religion of the book, and it's not what you would learn about in RE in school, but it's certainly a dominant view, a mindset, but one that is perhaps
when you're collectively believing in something, it is a religion, isn't it? So I'm really excited about discussing those.
That'd be good.
I hope you don't mind coming back again now.
No, it'd be good actually. It'd be nice to have another chat.
It's been really interesting, and you can't rush these topics, can you?
No.
I feel really lucky that I've had this chance to talk to you. I'm really nervous about pressing stop and saving this before I, accidentally delete it or something. Can you imagine if something like that happened? So I've been trying to just pray that I don't mess it up, because that was amazing, guys. Thank you so much. Look at me, I've got my hands in prayer. Thank you. It's been amazing. I hope you enjoyed it.
Yes,
really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Really enjoyed it. Even if this gets deleted and
No, it won't. It won't. We can pray.
So,
But thank you for listening, and pass it on. If we can get more listeners, it'd be really good. And
we'll do a bit. We'll certainly put the word out.
Definitely, and anyone who does choose to listen, pass it on to 5 people. Tell them it's amazing. Try and leave comments as well, and only positive comments. We've got an ego, and we don't like negative comments. They affect us mentally, and it is mental health awareness. It was yesterday, wasn't it?
Indeed,
So it would be more important that you just give us 5-star ratings. We've been sold into that Black Mirror world now, haven't we? Ratings are important, so make them 5-star. Thank you very much, and catch you for the next one, I guess.